Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I could review for you this big old guy right here. This is Bladeshow 2019. That's right, I am finally getting around to doing my Bladeshow video. But first off, I want to thank my Patreon patrons. They made it possible for me to spend probably about $1,000 to head out to Blade, involving, long plane tickets, hotels, everything like that. So thank you guys so very, very much. I always appreciate the support, the people who support me, but this time it felt especially real. Just because that's a big expense, and it's not something I can sell afterwards, or at least selling experiences. Do you have to do friends and family for that? I don't know. Either way, thank you very much to Patreon patrons. I also want to thank very much the folks who helped me out. Specifically Blade HQ, Ben and the Blade HQ team, that is, let me stand around their booth in a Batman mask as doing a meet and greet. And that's certainly an experience. It was very, very much appreciated. And also, Dean, Jen, and the Hellacious Blades team, they were over here someplace, for actually not only being long-term supporters of the channel, but also letting me keep my backpack at their table during the day, which makes for a much less sweaty back as you are wandering around a big room full of people in Atlanta. So, there you go. Next thing, size comparison. Here it is against the Spyderco Delica. We can see here that this show is substantially larger than the Spyderco Delica. Oh my God, is it big. Actually, to give you a sense of this, like this little area right here, was probably like this is a 20 by 30 foot, exhibition space. This is huge. It is minutes to walk across the entire thing, and to get all the way over here, there is a lot of floor space to cover here. I must have put in something like 8 miles on the first day wandering around the damn place. It was serious business. So it is a large thing. And for those of you who are unaware, the Blade Show itself is sort of the largest trade show for cutlery geeks out there certainly in the US, maybe even in the world. It is a very, very impressive thing, and there are people from all the various different large production companies. You get all of the big names, Spyderco, Benchmade, a bunch of folks out there and about, who are just have these big spaces rented out. Buck, all of them folks are there, and so it's it's a big freaking deal. And then finally, one other thing to note. Today, I'm going to talk about the good, the great, the bad, and the ugly of it. But for something that's a little bit more travelogish, go ahead and check out Gear Geeks Live. This episode hasn't been fully edited yet, but nevertheless, there will be an episode coming up here soon where Tony Scullambridi and I talk about the Blade Show experience generally, and I give some of my other thoughts there. So if you want a little bit more content, GearGeeksLive.com, or search for it on iTunes or whatever. We'll get you some additional information once that episode drops. So anyways, let's go ahead and jump into the good, the great, the bad, and the ugly of this very interesting little knife show over here. To start with, on the good side, one thing I have to say is, a thing that a lot of folks, I think, underestimate when they first, go talk about the show is the sensory overload of it all. This is a huge show. Like I said, this is 20 by 30 here. That's a lot of people. Every damn one of these little rectangles here is occupied by a custom knife maker or some other person vaguely related to the knife industry. So there is a huge amount of stuff. This is a 3-day show. I got there. So just so you know, I flew out here from San Diego at like 10:30. I arrived on Thursday, that is. I arrived on Friday at, 5 a.m. or something like that. And then I went solid the entire time, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and I still feel like I missed a bunch of stuff, or a bunch of booths where I'm like, damn it, I should have spent more time there, or I should have gone back over there, or oh man, I missed this person. So the amount of, just knifery around this place is kind of inconceivable for a lot of folks. But the nice thing about that, though, is that you get to handle everything. You can walk up to a manufacturer's booth, and like, Spyderco has, I think, pretty much their entire lineup just there. And you can just say to the guy behind the counter, like, hey, can you hand me this guy? I want to check this out. Oh, I want to check this guy out. Oh, can I see this? And you just do that over and over and over and over again. And you can check out everything. You can see, oh, this is good. This is really good. Oh, I thought that was ugly on the internet, but that's actually really cool looking in hand, or oh, I thought that looked great on the internet, but and so it gives you a really good chance to handle a bunch of stuff, whether it's brand new releases or old models I'd missed, etc. And it's real easy to sort, the gems from the junk, to get a sense of the ergonomics on something when you're actually standing there at the table. So that is a beautiful thing. The overload portion of it is definitely real, but it's also just great. So that's the first good thing. It's a sensory overload. Next thing, I learned a bunch. I made a point to talk to a bunch of knife makers, to walk up to people and, just get information, to ask the questions that I have always wondered about. In some cases introducing myself as, Nick Shabazz. In other cases, trying to keep it low-key, although usually getting made because of the voice and whatnot. But nevertheless, I did my best to learn as much as I could, to ask the dumb questions. And I think that's very helpful for me. I know a fair number of things about cutlery at this point, but I know relatively little compared to somebody who's been doing it for their entire career. And so I'm learning more about the complexity and the nuances, especially at the production level, about knife making as I talk to folks that I wouldn't have learned just sitting at home reading the internet or something like that. It is an entirely different world. Being on that side of things and being able to ask those questions was actually very helpful. Next thing, of course, I got to handle a bunch of great stuff. I'll talk about some of the most impressive gear a little bit later on here. But at the same time, there is a lot of advantage to just handling a bunch of stuff because you get a very quick sense of, I hadn't paid much attention to this brand, but they're actually worth a damn. Or, I'd heard a bunch about these people and nope. That's a really, really nice thing. I also got to wander around. I had the fun experience of, for a decent part of the show, I was hanging around with my buddies Michael and Darren, both of whom are, into knives, but they're not quite as crazy about it as, well, some of us are. And so I got to see many of these things through their eyes, and I got to introduce them to areas of the knife world that they'd never really seen before. I mean, it's one thing to say, there are some really nice custom knives out there, and it's another thing to say, okay, this is Michael Raymond's table. I want you to pick this up, hold it. I want you to manipulate it. Look at the detail here. Look at this area here. Look at this inlay. And to be able to do that with somebody, not just at, your local knife shop, but at the store where everything is available, that was actually really a joy for me. Because it's like, oh, wow, okay. And I get to experience it again. I get to see for the first time somebody handle a Ron Best and just be like, oh my God. Whereas for me, I'm not going to say it's old hat, it's really good. But, for me, some of the amazingness has been lost. I'm jaded, but to see it through new eyes was a joy 100%. Next thing, the pit is a beautiful thing. So actually, if you go out this neck of the woods here, off the map down to this way, you get into the hotel. I didn't actually stay at the conference hotel because the rooms were completely booked and whatnot, but I wasn't so far. But I did spend some time on the Saturday night in the pit, which is basically a big area in the atrium of this hotel that is just filled with a bunch of knife guys gradually drunkening themselves. Even though I don't drink, it's still really interesting because you just get to talk to a lot of people and it's less formal. You're not standing across the table from them. They're not being mobbed by a bunch of other people necessarily, and so you can actually just sit down and have a great experience chatting with people. And so there is definitely a joy in that. The last time I went, I really didn't have a chance to spend much time in the pit, but in the future I definitely will, because I think that's really a part of the experience. Next thing, I did get to get excited about some companies. What I mean by that is very often when I see a new company, or frankly a company that I've just not dealt with before, it's sort of it's always a little tough to know what's going on. It's tough to say, because, especially with these overseas made companies, like, oh, is there stuff, are they using good factories? Is their stuff well made, or is it, beautiful but ultimately kind of crap? And there were a few companies I was actually quite excited about once I got there. One of those companies is Artisan Cutlery. Artisan is a company I'd sort of steered a little bit clear of at one point in time, but talking to them, I really do get the sense that they are going about this with a sense of honor, and they're trying weird things. So handling more of their stuff, I'm actually going to be definitely checking out some more of their stuff. This is a Balisong-ish multi-tool, but it also happens to be an automatic, which is kind of ridiculous. Look, it's completely nuts, but it's also kind of cool. And so spending some time there was actually, it showed me something. I learned something about that process. Other interesting folks that I got to talk with, a Summit Knife Company. You just saw the review of the Half Dome not so long ago. Alliance Designs is another company that I'd been kind of on the fence about. This is their Angry Mini Baby Bear, I think. It's another Laconico production, but nevertheless, it's always tough when you see these companies like, is this stuff worth a damn? Is this worth my time? In fact, it turns out that it is. And so I got to handle their stuff, and I got to talk with them and, kind of get their story, etc. So I got a couple of review samples afterwards, which is going to be a helpful thing for me to check their stuff out. Another company is actually A.G. Russell. They were way down at the end here. This is an old company. I mean, I'm not claiming they were a brand new thing or anything like that, but I just never really handled their stuff. But going over there and spending some time at the table, one of the things that they do interestingly is that they tend to use relatively lower end materials. You get like 8CR13 MOV, but their prices are also relatively low as well. And so it was always, I'd kind of always dismissed them as like, oh yeah, they're those companies that are making a bunch of stuff at 8CR13 MOV out of China. But the thing is, I'm always on the lookout for good budget options, and I think there are some good budget options over in that neck of the woods. It's the lightning bug by them. So afterwards, I came home and I placed an order to check out some of their stuff. Who else? Gerber, actually, believe it or not, freaking Gerber gear. The Gerber is in the baby food, or more specifically, Gerber is in the company that's got that history of knife making that had some times of trouble. I ended up sitting down, weirdly enough, at the banquet which I went to, which was entertaining. But anyways, sitting down at the banquet with the guy with actually the team from Gerber Gear, and he was showing me the prototype of this particular knife, the Gerber Fastball, and actually, it's a pretty impressively designed knife. Keep an eye out for the review of this guy later on. Certainly, they've got some work to do still, but that was actually very impressive, and that was an interesting connection to make there. And so, either way, it was nice to get excited about some new companies, to find some new blood, so to speak, of companies that seem to be doing things okay. Again, not that A.G. Russell and Gerber are new blood, but still to find some things for the channel that are actually worth taking a look at and spend a little bit more time with. You know, that's a joy for me. Then finally, on the good side, there was some very impressive gear, and I want to talk about a couple of makers that impressed me sort of above and beyond, presented in no particular order. I mean, to start with, obviously there are the people there who are really impressive, your Ron Bests of the world. I'm going to try and flash some footage on screen here. Yay, video editing, movie magic. Whoa, there's a Ron Best phase on screen. Wow. Amazing. There is, Ron Best, Michael Raymond, the freaking course. I know that I like his stuff a lot. Pena Knives. I actually got to stop by his booth, and I handled the prototype of the front flipper trapper. Hold on. He's making a production version of this particular knife that I own and love. This is the custom. And oh boy, is that gonna be freaking good. But anyways, got to stop by him. And, so those are folks I already knew were good. And similarly, some other folks that I know are really good as well got to handle some of their new stuff. So Brad Zinka, I'll insert some video here. He is a maker who, he was over in Tables someplace. He is constantly good. His stuff is not necessarily like fancy particularly. What he does best is super lightweight pieces. And, some friends of mine, actually Zelric on YouTube, picked up one of his pieces. He's just got some really, really cool stuff. I just like the cut of his jib, and he seems like a nice guy overall. Alamic Cutlery is a group of guys, I suppose, and probably gals, that I like their stuff a lot, and I got to handle some of their new models. The Soloist, which is a big old frame lock, the Rainmaker, which is a long old frame lock, as well as their new model, the Whippersnapper, which, yep, I've already placed my order for it. Well, I told him, damn it, you're going to take my money at some point. This is what it's going to look like. Not, taking orders yet. But still, that was nice, but also no shock. And, of course, the Hawks. Look, what they had on the table was their auction deadlock piece. It was just beautifully engraved. Oh, my God. That was nice. I have no need of a deadlock, especially living in California, but oh my God, was that thing beautiful. So, that was good. These are folks I'd known before, but it was nice to see some of their new stuff, and it's always a joy. And I'm leaving people out. Sam from HEA Designs, I get to handle the Flame, which you saw on my channel already. Oh my God. Anyways, there were great people out there, no doubt. However, there were some people that kind of jumped out at me that I wasn't as aware of. One of those folks was Berg Blades. They were up in here someplace, and I'll put some stuff on the screen. In addition to some custom knives, they've actually got a pretty impressive set of mid-techs out there, with some very nice grinds to them. I walked away suitably impressed. I like the cut of their jib, so to speak, in terms of that. So I'm definitely, next time they drop one of those releases, I'm going to see if I can't get one on the channel, because I think it's going to be interesting. Jonathan McNeese was out in this neck of the woods. This is the guy who designed the Spyderco McBee. And at one point, and I like that little knife a lot. And in fact, I was talking with him about it, and he said at one point in time something like, oh, yeah. People, it takes him a while to figure out, like there's this YouTuber, Nick Shabazz. And it took him a while, and then I eventually said, Jonathan, Who do you think you thought? Anyways, it was an entertaining moment. But nevertheless, I like a lot of his stuff. He had some really cool stuff on the table there. He had some customized Spyderco McBees, which I always love seeing. And just was a really nice guy overall. I'm a big fan of his. Matt Martin, actually, I've reviewed one of his pens. And he's actually he's related to R.J. Martin. I believe he's his son. But nevertheless, I really was impressed with his selection of pens. He had a lot of it is like high-end material stuff. It's like $500 for a pen. And for a lot of folks, that's prohibitive. But I think if you're looking for a really, really fancy pen, he's got one that you should probably check out. Actually, a couple of them. So that's good. And then the French folks. David Lespect, I'm going to put some video up on, was very impressive. He impressed a lot of people at the show there. And in fact, some of my good friends ended up walking away with some of his stuff because he was really good. Was very impressed there. And then Philippe Georget. I entered exactly one lottery. This freaking card didn't win. What a jerk. But anyways, I entered exactly one lottery, and that was Georget. Because he had this 520 that was on the table that was just good. It was real good. And it was going to be like $1,400 or more, I think. But oh my God, was it nice. It was really, really well done. That's, by the way, the production version of this little guy here. Or I'm sorry, the custom version. This is the 523, which is a larger version, but still. Yeah, this is the CKF. I like his stuff a lot. A lot of folks had posted and are like, okay, well, it looks like a fine looking knife. Then he handled it like, oh yeah. So I came away from this show really respecting Georget. Then finally, one other person that jumped out at me was Cmf Metalworks. He was over in this other, in the side room that we'll talk about in a bit here. But handling his stuff was actually very impressive because he does weird stuff. It's like right on that edge with Art Knife for me. It's not like I'm not looking at this going like, oh my God, it's my perfect everyday carry. But oh wow, was it impressive. Amazing grinds, beautiful finishing, just really, really cool stuff. And so meeting him, he and I had talked a few times on Instagram, and generally he got into watches, poor damn thing. But anyways, nevertheless, it was really nice to actually see his stuff and, know that it was worth a damn. In fact, it was very impressive. So those were some of the folks that jumped out at me, and so that to me is the good. Is that there was very impressive gear from a variety of people that I just mentioned. I got to get excited about some companies whose work I hadn't really handled before, or at least hadn't really spent much time with. The pit is a joy. I got to wander around with some friends who weren't quite as deep into the game, handle a bunch of high-end stuff. I learned a lot, and there is a sensory overload there that is really hard to capture. On the great side to me, the conversations, the people. I mean, everybody always says this. This is kind of a cliche of Blade Show, like, oh, Blade Show, it's about the people. But the funny thing is, it is, right? I mean, at some level, there is a joy of going there and handling a bunch of pocket knives. But the thing is, you can do that in a lot of places, maybe not to the same extent. But what you don't get in a lot of places is the fact that you're just standing in line someplace and the person behind you is just as crazy into pocket knives as you are. That's liberating in a lot of ways, right? There are a lot of folks who are just like, oh my God, I love this stuff though, and so there's this glee in it all. But anyways, I had a bunch of really great conversations, both inside the knife-making world, in the community, and elsewhere. In the knife-making world, I spent a lot of time actually chatting with and building bridges with folks at production communities. I mean, doing things like letting them know that even as a critic, I do appreciate their work. Because it's important, I think, in many ways for people to hear that, to understand that, for instance, although I may be very, very critical of some of their designs or some of their choices, that at the end of the day, I appreciate what they're doing for the community, because without these companies, we wouldn't, get any of these knives. And so, I think that's important. And also advocating for the things I hear regularly in the community. It's not that often, and I'm not going to name names, because that feels a little bit tacky to me, but the simple fact is, it's not very often that you get to stand there with somebody who's in front of you who is at a higher leadership position, not just, their PR flack on Instagram. Not to, demean the PR flacks, but still. And just say, hey, what's with the quality? Or, hey, come on, how about these grinds? Can we do better? And actually get a real response. In some cases, we're working on it. In some cases, what grinds? You get those kinds of questions. Anyways, nevertheless, it's always a good thing to be able to have those conversations, because I think it's a way to bridge the gap between the community and the makers. And honestly, it did lead to a bunch of exciting discussions, both in terms of pre-production, consulting, stealthiness, as well as just good relationships for the future. And a couple of folks have offered me factory visits, like to come up and see, and I may take them up on that, because the more I can learn, the better. So anyways, talking with knife makers in the production world was very helpful to me. But also custom, and frankly, I respect these people. That's the other thing I want to highlight here, is that I'm not looking at it when I walk up to a table and I'm talking to like Eric Lesser or something like that. Here he goes, name dropping, but still, I mean, there is a level at which I certainly respect these folks. And so actually getting a chance to talk to Eric Lesser, talk to Sal, talk to Rick Hinderer, talk to these folks, Doug Ritter, it's like, oh, wow, I really like your work, and you're this human standing right in front of me. There's a joy to that, even just there's a little bit of a fanboyish squee, but it's there, 100%. But in the custom world, too, it's always nice to talk. I'm meeting a bunch of folks I appreciate. Folks like Anton Malashev, Gareth Bull, John McNeese, the Grimsmo Knives team, Brad Southard, Ilya Solomonic, who's the part of the Olamic team who I hadn't met before. Just, there were all kinds of really great, Ian from CMF. There were lots of great folks out there, and I'm sure I'm forgetting 50 names. And if I've forgotten yours, I'm so sorry. I had a lot of conversation. But nevertheless, it's always great to just chat with people, whether it's at their table or hanging out in the pit or whatever. It lets you both appreciate them as people, as well as to appreciate their work in a brand new way. And so there's definitely a joy there. And frankly, you get to know which of them you really like genuinely as humans, and which of them are like, wow, you make great knives, but you're a terrible human. By the way, I don't mean that about any of the people I mentioned up above here. Do not infer. That's just yeah. Anyways, and I always, no matter what, I appreciate the dedication to their craft. This is my hobby. This is something I do on the weekends. Greetings from Sunday afternoon. Well, I guess morning still. But still, this is what they live and breathe 24/7. This is how they're making their living. This is their livelihood. And I respect that very, very much. And so that's always nice. And then also just folks in the knife community. Ranging from a bunch of YouTubers and prominent community folks. And I'm going to forget names here, but like Dr. Frunky, Slicey Dicey, Kevin Cleary, Frankie and Berg, Eugene Kwan, Daddy-O, Levon from Knife Nuts, Tony Miedor, my buddy Mike Bloom and Blade on Instagram. He's been a longtime supporter of the channel, and he's a great guy overall, and he has a hell of a collection. So but it was very, very nice to meet all of these folks just out and about, as well as a bunch of other folks just from Instagram. It is a joy to hang out with a bunch of knife geeks, partly because they're solid folks by and large, but partly because they bring their toys and you get to play too. I mean, there were some moments where like a $60,000 Pelican case drops down on the table, and outside just this torrent of mokutai comes flying out. It's kind of amazing. And so that's a chance to get to handle the stuff that often may never make it to the table, or at least not in time for me to see it. So, there's a joy, 100% in the community. I very much appreciated that, but maybe the thing I appreciated most was actually the chatting with my fans. There were lots of folks who just came up to me and said, hey, like they'd sidle up to me at a booth afterwards and say, hey, I really appreciate your work. I'm like, I don't know what you're asking me. I have no idea oh, come on, Nick, I know. Hey, you figured it out. I'd hand him a business card and move on with my life, right? Like, here you go, keep quiet. But that was always a joy, because I'm really bad at hiding my voice. But nevertheless, there was a joy in that. But I also did a full-on meet and greet on Sunday, and honestly, that was in many ways the highlight of my trip. I threw on a Batman mask, like a legit latex Batman mask in Atlanta at Blade Show, which, by the way, did not have ear holes from the factory, so I had to drill those in. So, hearing was not necessarily a good skill. But and then I just walk over to the freaking Blade HQ booth, and there's a big old freaking crowd, not big old, but probably like 10, 15 people waiting to meet me, and that was beautiful. And I really want to thank the fans, young and old, who came out to say hello. And I mean, I had and a bunch of great kids who were really enthusiastic about the hobby came out to say hi. That was great. I mean, just chatting with them, signing stickers, business cards, there was a joy in that, and just frankly getting a chance to interact with people who yeah, that was a lot of fun. Completely insane, by the way. And the one thing that oh man, my very favorite. Well, maybe that's not true. There were some hot, touching moments. But one of my favorite parts was watching the old timers walking by this booth, because this was right, here over in the corner, like walking by the booth, looking over, seeing some jackass standing there in a Batman mask and just like shaking their heads, like I just heard in their head, goddamn millennials with their friggin' cosplay. Like, I could hear the bitterness, and it was magical. So, that was a joy. And And so for me, at least, the greatest part about all of this was the fact that you guys are all gems. The folks who introduced yourselves, the folks who came to the meet and greet, all the folks in the community I got to chat with and who took me in, so to speak, and as well as the knife making world, the production, custom knives. The people are really the best part of this show, and I came away feeling that more than ever. Oh, also ProTech, I forgot to mention. I ended up spending some time with their team from time to time, just waiting for the banquet and such. That is a great group of people, and I don't say that for any other motive except they're a great group of freaking people. ProTech Dave is one of the nicer human beings. He's the ProTech Dave Wattenberg is there. He's like the Grand Poobah, whatever his title is. He's one of the nicer human beings I'm aware of. So, the whole thing, the people are just spectacular. That is the great. So there you go. Holy crap, 24 minutes and we're just hitting the bad. On the bad side, there does remain a lot of waiting in line. And this time it was even more diverse in the lines because this is your main entrance here. And so on the Friday, that is, before the show starts, there is a line that goes here, and then it goes off into the hotel area, off to here, and then loops back around. And then by a certain point in the afternoon, it was going down this little staircase and then into this area here. So this was a big old line, and this was the line of people with early bird passes waiting to get in and rush a given table to try and buy up all the the Spectres or the Chamoises or whatever this year's in knife was. So that was definitely, there's a lot of waiting. And there's a lot of complexity too, because and by the way, there's a separate waiting line over here for people who had the VIP, who used to be VIP, is now cap, whatever. There's a lot of waiting, and frankly, a lot of people finagling exhibitor passes to get in earlier. I mean, look, the timing to get into this is a little crazy because exhibitors only from this time, then early birds, then media, then cap people, then shows open, then the show closed. It was kind of a thing. So, yeah, there's a lot of waiting. It's kind of a joy because the people you're waiting with are just as geeky about pocket knives as you are. But, that's a thing. Next thing, the tables area, especially this vicinity, there were still a lot of freaking glass holes. That's my term for people sitting there with glass top cases full of overpriced case knives and buck knives and microtechs with, old farts glaring at you over them like, oh, you're not going to buy anything, you better move along. Like, I don't care for those folks. I mean, they better be letting those folks in only when they've run out of any other way to sell to somebody of interest. Some of them actually did have some interesting pieces, and I'm fine but I get the impression from some of them that they were just kind of there bringing their collection and, wanting to show off to the other, the three other people on earth who collect case peanuts, as whatever it happens to be. And I don't mean to target them specifically, but it was just like, a lot of this whole area was like, no, that aisle's just glass holes, and then I can just kind of move on. But there were a lot of, I really hope they weren't turning makers away for that. Because I know there's a market for it, but at least to me, that's largely dead weight. Speaking of dead weight, a lot of the tables there were not relevant to consumers and were meant for makers instead. Now, mind you, I'm not sitting here saying that knife-making supply companies shouldn't have tables or anything like that. No, absolutely, this is Blade Show. It's an important area, and a lot of people go to these things to buy materials, to come home with great steels, to come home with, stabilized wood and things like that. But it was really striking how many people were selling stabilized wood out in the tables. Huge numbers of them, as well as like abrasive companies. There was one group, Combat Abrasives, who I love because I'm just picturing two people trying to sandpaper each other to death. And then just grinder companies. I mean, huge numbers of these folks were like heat treat ovens, grinder companies, those kinds of things. And again, and people grinding in real time on the show floor, by the way. Thanks for the noise and the particulate there, buddy. But nevertheless, this is great for makers. It's a welcome part of the show, but it's not the main thrust of the show for many people there, and having a bunch of those people distributed in the area, it was just a little frustrating, especially the grinder people, because that gets a little old real quick. Like, I know you enjoy throwing sparks, but good lord, air filter, maybe? Just saying. So that was a little bit tough. A lot of that was just like stabilized wood, and that's not super relevant to consumers. And actually, that brings us to the next point, which is that this was a two-room show now. It used to be, in 2017 when I went, there was just this main room here, but the show has grown a lot, and they're starting to outgrow their hotel, and so now there's this second room over here, where they had another area full of tables, but they also had another area full of, like actual booths here. And look, at some level, that's great, because it lets the show grow, but the thing is, most of the people were in the main room, but they had a few random brands and companies and, vendors in this little side area here. There didn't seem to be any rhyme or reason why. For some reason, Buck ended up in here, and the freaking grinder company A, B, and C ended up in the main room. I don't freaking know. And so it was a little weird, because it's actually kind of hard to transfer from one to the other, because you come out here, go all the way over here, all the way over here, and then come back in here. It just wasn't ideal. I kind of either wish that they'd opened them up to one another, or better still, that they did something a little different. Actually, I'd like to make a small proposal on that front. I'd love to see them put all of the people that knife consumers want to see in the main room. So things like knife makers, production companies, dealers, vendors, basically folks who are relevant to non-makers. Put them all in the main room, and then put the knife-making supply people over here in the smaller room. Put all the stabilized wood country out in this area. Have the grinder alley over here, and put up some freaking air filters or something. And this keeps all the grinder dust concentrated. It keeps the tables area full of stabilized wood, and it gives knife makers one-stop shopping without being bothered by, random jackasses. And that way, if you're interested in buying steel, you can go over here, but otherwise, the show is over here for you. And I feel like that would be better both for the custom makers in a room that maybe people don't even know is a room, because I got the impression that a lot of folks didn't know there was a second room, but it also makes things a little bit easier. I don't know. I think that would just be a better use of the space. I'm backseat show designing here, but I do think that could make a major difference and make the show a little bit better, I think, for both sides. But I don't know. What the heck am I doing? But anyways, and I know that many people are both enthusiasts and people who are in the industry, but I don't know. Whatever. That's beside the point. It would just make the show easier. So, to me, at least, all that is the bad. It's that the two-room structure wasn't super amazing and that it was laid out without rhyme or reason, and a lot of folks didn't know this existed. A lot of the tables were meant for meant for people in the industry rather than for consumers. The number of people with glass cases looking angrily at you appears to be growing, and there remains a lot of waiting in line with a very weird schedule to get into the show. On the ugly front, there were two major issues remaining. One of them is knife safety. It remains a problem. There were two actual incidents where I was almost hurt. The first one was a freaking bally boy. Now look, I respect very much the skill involved with acrobatic balisong flipping. It is not something I can do, and it's not something I could do safely in a crowd either. But the thing is, I almost got stabbed in the foot by a freaking bally boy while looking at stuff in an unrelated booth. I forget exactly where I was. I think I was like at DPX or something like that. Just looking at what they had, and some little shit was, pardon my French, was flipping his balisong and did one of those, bounce off the shoulder things, and it comes flying and it lands blade down in the carpet, well, not deep in the carpet, but still, the blade hits the carpet like maybe 6 inches away from my foot. This bugs the crap out of me because these freaking and it wasn't just that one kid. There were a bunch of freaking kids, flipping their live blades in crowded areas. They are going to really hurt somebody and ruin it for everybody. I mean, seriously, they need to pick one of the little rooms over here and they need to separate it out as like the Darwin room. Have all the little bally boys flipping it out over there with their live blades, and then the rest of the damn time you either keep it in your pocket or you flip a trainer. I mean, seriously, this bothers me a lot because this is why we can't have nice things. And they're not advocating well for the hobby. This is a knife show. This is the one place on earth where knife safety should be paramount. Everyone should know this, and the freaking bally boys are definitely not helping anything. So balisong people, please police your own. This is how we're going to end up with metal detectors right here. If people keep doing that and somebody stabs a little old lady trying to do an acrobatic off-the-shoulder freaking flip, it's just going to be bad. I mean, get off my lawn. Sure, I'm old and bitter here, but stop trying to stab me. And that just feels like a really dumb thing that people, for some reason, seem to think is acceptable in that community. The other issue is I almost got stabbed by an old-timer at the Alliance Designs booth. Look, it was a relatively small booth over here, and it was relatively deep, so that, people were kind of crammed in to try and get a sense of this. But I'm, sitting here trying to handle a knife, and some jackass takes a bigger, piece and, turns around to show it to somebody, and as he's doing so, just barely, doesn't graze my side. It was to the point where, 3 people at the booth were not sure whether I'd just gotten cut, and I'm checking my shirt to see if he got it. He was completely oblivious, but it was just oh my God, people. And so it's not just the bally boys, but still, I mean, I need that kidney, thank you, don't stab me. And so really, we need to be very careful with knife safety here. I shouldn't have to say that, but it keeps being an issue, and this is how we're going to end up with stupid things like knife bans at a knife show. So people, please be a little safer, and bally boys, come on. On the other ugly front, the tables got emptied out real quick. By Sunday, this area was largely a ghost town. The only real things left were production companies. I mean, they were smart makers. frankly, kind makers who kept some unsaleable knives around. They left a representative sample. They kept one of each model. Or who spread their sales over a couple of days where they got, a big stock of things. They put out a bunch on Friday, then they put out a bunch on Saturday and put out a smaller bunch on Sunday. That was a beautiful thing. Or they did like a last-minute Instagram lottery. I really hope that things like that become a part of the culture where, the blade organizers maybe even wander around and are doing things to encourage people to actually run their table all of the days. Because by Sunday, it was really sad in there. Like a Sunday afternoon blowout where you have another round of sales by makers in demand, that would really change the character of the show. Love to see a final round of lotteries there, because then people who show up even on Saturday might still get that full experience. But it really bugs me a lot when you're turning people away from your empty booth because you sold everything out within 10 minutes on Friday. It was just like, I want to handle your stuff. I want to see what work you're doing here, and you're not allowing me to do that. And so rather than getting a chance to see that, wow, your work is really good, I want to order something down the road, I leave it just like, wow, you're a jerk who sold everything in 10 minutes. And that's really frustrating for me. I don't like that. And I really hope that in the future, makers put a little bit more care towards holding on to some of their stuff, not for the fans who are there right now, but for the fans who might pick up some of their stuff later on in the future. Do an auction at the end, do something like that. But that was just really frustrating. There were a bunch of makers whose stuff I really wanted to see, and I just didn't get a chance to because I didn't get to their area until Saturday. It was just like, oh, well, that sucks. And so, unfortunately, that was really ugly. Having somebody whose work I really want to see sitting there at an empty table when someone's bought the knife out of their pocket, like, I know there are financial incentives, but guys, it was tough. So that to me is the ugly, is that the tables emptied out pretty quickly still, at least for some makers. There were definitely responsible makers who did it right. And then the freaking knife safety was a problem. You do not flip a ballast song in a crowd. I'm sorry, no, that's a dumb idea. Final conclusion front. One of the biggest questions I've been asked actually is, what did I buy? In practice, I didn't really buy anything, which is funny. I mean, part of it is actually not so funny because well, I flew, and in fact, I lived out of a backpack for the weekend, so I didn't check a bag, and I didn't want the TSA to have a crack at any, particularly expensive gear. So the stuff that I did pick up actually just went home with Slicey Dicey, and then he mailed it out to me later on, which is very nice of him, because he drove. But anyways, so that was that. But I didn't really pick up all that much. One of the things that I did pick up was this guy. This is a Holt Spectre. This knife was actually donated to the channel by the Holts for a charitable thing. It's not a part of the current charitable giveaway because I want to do something a little more special with it. But they donated this knife free and clear and said, do something charitable with it. That's a magnificent thing. I'm really grateful for that. It got me a chance to play with another V3 Spectre, and holy crap. Yeah. I also finalized my order for my particular Spectre, which is coming, as well as an Olemic Whippersnapper and whatnot. And so, but this is the main thing that I actually came home with. But again, that's going to be for the channel. The other thing that I actually received was this little guy. This is a coin from Grimsmo Knives. This was a little project that they made. They only made a number of them, and it says right on the side, before you ask, never to be sold, only gifted, and no, I'm not going to gift it to you. But anyways, this was actually given to me by Sky, who's one of the Grimsmo Knives team. He and I ended up spending a fair amount of time chatting. He's a really nice guy, and it turns out he's been a fan of the channel for even before he started working at Grimsmo. And that was heartwarming. It was really nice to chat with him, and he handed me this. It was just like, okay. Yes, thank you, Sky. I will take that. And frankly, it's very nice. So, I did pick that guy up, and that was nice. And I also placed some orders for after the show. I arranged some review samples as well, like the Alliance design stuff. Definitely, arranged for that there. And placed a few orders, like some, the A.G. Russell stuff. I got home and I just made the order because I knew I was going to be interested in it. And then I got a bunch of other stuff I'm going to be ordering here soon. But yeah. Next question a lot of folks are asking is, would you go back? Well, yeah, absolutely. If I can swing it next year, I would absolutely love to. And frankly, if Bladeshow West looks like it's going to be worth a damn, and I'm going to have the time, because that's always the biggest concern with me, I would absolutely love to do it. It was a joy, 100%. And if somebody said, hey, Bladeshow's again tomorrow, I'm in. Yeah, 100%. And then the bigger question is, was it worth it? Because it's really expensive. And the big question is, well, who are you? At some level, for me, absolutely, yes, it was worth it. Partly because I'm really interested in production knives. That's my biggest area of interest, and in some ways, that's what Bladeshow does best. The custom stuff happens, but it happens very quickly. It happens like Friday by 2 p.m. or something like that. Most of the customs are already sold. And so, unfortunately, unless you're already there for that, that's a little bit tougher. I mean, Saturday for a custom knife lover is not such a great place. But as a production knife person, oh yeah, it's absolutely worth it. And like I said, the biggest part for me is the social element of it. I mean, sure, it'd be nice to score a really amazing like that I got in that Georget. Yeah, I'd be a happy man. But the more important part is just talking to people. That made me a happy man too. And meeting people and getting to know folks, to me, that was the big one. So, for me, absolutely, it was 100% worth it. So, that is that's your final conclusion. I would argue that Blade Show 2019 was a gem. Definitely had some good and some bad and some ugly. Had some great for that matter. But it is really about the people, and yeah, that was a joy. So, thank you again, Patreon patrons, for making it possible. Thank you again, Blade HQ, for letting me show up at your booth in a Batman mask without asking too many questions. And thank you, Hellacious, for helping me out with the backpack storage. And thanks everybody who stopped by, said hello, and you all are gems. And sorry for the delay on getting this ready, but yeah. So there you go. Hope this was interesting to you, and have yourselves just an absolutely wonderful rest of your day. Bye now.